Okay, so far we've created our table view with our bird information in it. And now what we'll do is we'll customize the way that the cells look in that table view. So if we start here on the storyboard, what we'll do is we'll click on our prototype cell, which you can do here, or what you can do over here in the document outline. In the size inspector, uncheck automatic right here. And let's set our row height to something a little taller than 44 for now. Let's set it to something like 90. This gives us a little bit more room to work so that we can add some stuff to our view. Now I'll go ahead and add an image view first. So we click that and we drag it on screen. We can resize this manually with these little handles. This time I'm going to do it with my size inspector over here on the right. So I want to set the width to 75. I'm going to set the height also to 75 because I love squares. Great. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to center that vertically in my content view. And I'm going to set its leading space with control drag and then check leading space. 20 looks like a good number to me. And then we want to set the width and height constraints to make this always 75 by 75. So I'll hold control, and then click and drag inside of the image view itself. Let go and do height. There we go. Great. So now I have this image view. We're not going to set images from URLs in this video. And so let's put in some kind of like stand-in image. So here in the attributes inspector for the image view, I'm going to click on this drop down right here, and it's going to show me these system icons that are available automatically in iOS. These would typically be used for a tab bar or something to indicate on buttons or similar controls what kind of stuff people can do, like copying or moving something to the trash. I like the trash can, but we're not going to use that. Let's do one of these person ones. There's no birds, unfortunately. And let's also go ahead and set a width constraint on this. So let's come down to our constraint buttons here in the lower right hand corner and set width to 75. That's going to force the image to be a little bit bigger. So now we have our 75 by 75 image. Let's add some labels too. So I'm going to drag a label on there, and I'll do Command C, Command V, so I have two. We'll put them kind of like that. And then this label, I'm a fan of bigger text, so let's make it bigger. Let's make it 24. And then this one here, let's make that one 18 because that's going to be a description. So we're going to put the bird's name in the top one and a description in the bottom. So we'll click done there. And then I'm going to hold down Command and click on both labels. I'm going to come to the lower right hand corner here, and I'm going to embed these in a stack view. So I'll click on this rectangle with the arrow, embed them in a stack view, and then I have this nice vertical stack view. I would like to center that also vertically in the container, and I'm going to set the horizontal spacing on my stack view to be what it is now relative to the image. So let's check that number real quick. I do like the numbers to be round. 16, I think that looks okay. So we'll keep it like that. take a look at what constraints it thinks are missing. It thinks that the label needs constraints for the Y position and the height. These are both embedded inside of a stack view, which has been set, so I'm not so worried about that. But we will set a trailing constraint on that label, on the stack view rather. Control drag from the stack view to the content view. And let's do trailing space to container here. Now, what we're going to do here, it currently thinks that that trailing space should be whatever the trailing edge is plus 246. And that's a lot. And of course, we want the labels to be able to be wider than that. What I do want to make sure happens, though, is that these labels always stay at least 20 points away from the edge on the trailing side, because we have here 20 points away from the edge on the leading side is where the content starts. So 20 points away from the edge on the trailing side is where it should end. I'm going to set the super view's trailing to always be greater than or equal to the stack view's trailing with a constant of 20. So I hit enter on that. And that's going to ensure that these labels will always stop 20 points away from the edge here. Cool. So now I have my view kind of the way I want it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to make our first custom class, and it's going to be a custom view class specifically to hold our cell. So come up to File, hit New, File, and we can make this a Cocoa Touch class. You could also do it as a Swift file. We'll do it as Cocoa Touch, and I'll show you what that means. Let's name it bird cell. Give it a minute to think. There we go. Okay, so when you make a Cocoa Touch class rather than a Swift class, it automatically imports UIKit for you. We also said that we wanted our bird cell to extend UI table view cell. And these are things that we get for free when we extend the UI table view cell. All right. So now I'll hit Command Shift O, main. So I want my main.storyboard, Option Enter to open it on the right. Open my document outline here. Click on my bird cell. Go to the Identity Inspector, and here we're going to set the class to our new custom bird cell. That should autocomplete for you. And now what we'll do is we'll click and drag some of these attributes so that we can make our connections to each of these individual cells. Okay. So inside of our stack view, let's first rename these to be a little clearer. We're going to call this one bird name. And we'll call this one bird description. There we go. And now we're going to control, click, drag to create our outlet. Bird name label. Beautiful. It should also be noted that you can do this in the other direction. So I can type in IB outlet week var bird description label. And that's going to be a label as well. I'm going to force unwrap that. Now, when I add this IB outlet annotation, I automatically get this circle here. And if I click and drag from the circle over to my storyboard, I can connect it to some view that's already there. Nice. All right, so we've got our stuff connected up. Ultimately, in a future video, we'll connect up our image view too, but for now, we're going to leave that as our little stand-in person image. And now we're going to open our bird list view controller because there's some changes we need to make there. I'm going to shut the main.storyboard for now. Beautiful. All right, so you'll recall that in this method, we dequeue a reusable cell and we pass that over here to this variable called cell. So we get a cell, we set attributes on the cell, and then we return the cell. iOS uses this method to know what cells to put into our table view. Now we're going to adjust that method a little bit. So the type that we get from self.tableview.dq reusable cell, we can look at by holding down the Option key and clicking on this method. Let's take a look at the signature of this method. DQ reusable cell with identifier takes in a string identifier, the bird cell identifier that we dealt with before, and after the arrow, we learn that it returns a UI table view cell. Now you'll recall, looking at the bird cell, the UI table view cell is a superclass of bird cell. And so we need the return value of this method to end up giving us a variable that's more specific than its automatic return value. What we're going to do is something that we call force downcasting in Swift, which is when you say, I guarantee that the thing that's being returned from this method can be cast as an instance of a subclass of whatever the return object is. So in this case, this method returns a UI table view cell, and bird cell is a subclass of UI table view cell. So now cell will be self.tableview.dq reusable cell with identifier bird cell. We're going to take this exclamation point off the end and say as exclamation point bird cell. This is going to force downcast to a bird cell, which is a subclass of UI table view cell. Worth noting, as is always the case with these exclamation points, that when we do this, we are saying, I take responsibility for ensuring that this can always be a bird cell that it's downcast to, and I recognize that the app will crash if that's not ever true. There is an alternative, which is this optional downcast as question mark bird cell. In this case, if the return value of the method cannot be downcast to a bird cell, then we'll receive a nil value from the method. This question mark indicates that the result of this method is an optional. And that's what these errors are that you're seeing below. Because cell is now an optional, if we wanted to do it this way, we would need to say if let confirmed cell equal cell. So now what I'm doing is I'm binding the optional like so. We'll call confirmed cell here, and then we return confirmed cell. Now here's the thing. If we do this, we need to figure out what we're going to return outside of the optional bind, because the return value of this table view method is not an optional. And that's why we see this error here on line 43, missing return in a function expected to return UI table view cell. Now, could I go ahead and new up like some random empty cell here and return it? I absolutely could. But if for some reason my birds are not able to be put into bird cells and my cells aren't able to be downcast to bird cells, I don't know what value the app would be providing to my user right now. So I think I'm going to say that if my cells can't be cast to bird cells, I'm okay with the app crashing because something's really wrong in that case. So we'll keep this cast on line 35 as a force downcast. And we won't provide an alternative value for in case we can't do that downcast. Okay, so step 1, we have our bird cell. Step 2, now we need to set attributes on it. Our cell should now have a bird name label, and it does. So we'll set the text of that to the name of the bird from our self.flock data that we have at the top of the file. Cell bird description label also needs to be set. Bird description label right there. And since we don't have this attribute yet, I'm just going to set it to another stand-in value. And then we'll return our cell. So as you can see, we have the cells, but they're all kind of on top of each other. So there's one more thing that we need to change in the storyboard. If we come over to the storyboard, click on our table view, and come over to the size inspector. Here you see it says row height automatic and estimate automatic. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set our row height to 90, which is what we know our cell heights are. We don't need it to be automatic because we're not trying to customize by cell or anything like that. We may need to set the estimate too. All right. I don't think we need to set the estimate. I think we just need to make sure that these automatic boxes are unchecked so that it's not automatically attempting to assign the default height to these table view cells. All right, good. So now we have in our bird list view controller all of the logic in place to make our custom cells work. Next, we're going to make some changes on the back end in order to prepare ourselves to use more complex bird objects inside of our application.